Okay, I recently watched Werner Herzog, the German director's recent film Family Romance LLC. And it reminded me of two things. It was an excellent film, by the way. And it reminded me of two things. First, it reminded me of Edo period dramatist Chikamatsu Monzaimon's Joruri plays. Specifically, it reminded me how Chikamatsu tried to, in his plays, tried to represent the slender, what he said in a famous essay, the slender margin between the real and the unreal. Okay, so there's this blurring of the line between the real and the unreal in his plays, and we see that similar blurring of that distinction between reality and unreality in Werner Herzog's film Family Romance. And it reminded me of another work as well, namely Takahashi Genichiro's Kichiku, or Demon Beasts, a very short story that thematizes this blurring of the distinction between reality and reality, between artifice and nature, right? Sakui and Shizen, right? It's in a little slightly different register than the themes of Chikamatsu's plays and Herzog's film, but the theme is there nevertheless. So I thought we would make today's reading Takahashi Genichiro's Kichiku, translated by me as Demon Beasts. And it was published a few years ago. I'll give that information in the description. I'm going to do something a little bit different in this video. I'm going to read both the study guide and the full short story. I'm going to read it aloud in the video because the story is only 6 or 7 pages, so I think we can do the whole thing. So I'm going to read the study guide questions and information first, and then you can keep those questions in mind as you read the work in Japanese. I'll have the link provided. Read my translation as well. The link will be provided, and then answer the study guides that I will explain now. So first, the study guide for Kichiku Demon Beasts 2002. It was originally published, the Japanese version. And my translation came out in volume 4 of Monkey Business. You can purchase it there if you follow the link below in the description. First of all, Takahashi Genichiro, who is he? Born in 1951 in Hiroshima. He graduated from a famous prep school and landed a place in Yokohama National University. But his involvement in the student movement of the late 1960s, right, led him to his withdrawal. Many students were expelled, others withdrew, some were arrested during this fraught time. He worked in construction for about 10 years, during which time he suffered from a kind of aphasia. And it was as a form of rehabilitation that he eventually tried his hand at fiction. Aphasia is, of course, the condition where you forget how to use language, and you forget how to speak, how to write, how to understand and comprehend language. And in order to retrieve his faculty with language, he began writing fiction. In 1981, his debut work, Sayonara Gyangu Tachi, Goodbye Gangsters, Sayonara Gangsters, is the title of Michael Emmerich's translation, I think. Received an honorable mention for the Gunzo Prize for novel-length fiction. In 1988, he won the Mishima Yukio Prize for his novel Yuga de Kansho Teki na Nihon Yakkyu, Japanese baseball, elegant and sentimental. His works draw on material from both Eastern and Western, as well as from manga, pornography. I think he directed a pornographic film at one point in his career. And they display a penchant for both parody and pastiche. He's continued to be one of Japan's leading postmodernists. Okay, so this word postmodernist, postmodern, is often used to describe his works, which are often sort of metafictional. They break the barriers between narrator and author and so forth. The fourth wall they break quite often. His novel Nihon Bungaku Seiseishi, The Rise and Fall of Japanese Literature, based on the struggles of literary giants in the period when modern Japanese literature first took shape, garnered the Ito Sei Prize in 2002, and his collection of stories Sayonara Christopher Robin took the Taizaki Junichiro Prize in 2012. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's the collection in which Kichiku Demon Beasts appears. Sayonara Christopher Robin. He is also known as a writer of incisive essays on current events and as a commentator on horse racing. You flip on the TV and you see him appear from time to time commenting on news and politics and so forth as well. Alright, let's start with the study guide questions. These are, first we have 19 simple, straightforward questions about the plot, about character motivation and so forth. So answer those first, and then I have at the end 6 additional sort of further deeper thinking questions that we'll get to. Okay, so first I have 2 questions about narrative. Number 1, describe the style of prose. Okay, Steve, that's a straightforward question about the style the work is written in. Number 2, what is the narrative point of view? Okay, is it first person or third person? Is basically what I mean by that question. Where is the focalization point? This is the literary term that I always talk about, shoten in Japanese. Point of view is shiten in Japanese, first or third person. Focalization point, shoten, right? Where is the focalization point? Okay, so that question itself should give you a hint that the point of view is third person, right? Because you can't have focalization point in a first person narrative. What narrative techniques are employed in the story? Okay, there are many techniques that Takahashi employs in writing the story. Some of them I give several examples here: interior monologue, free indirect speech, and so forth. Add to that list and give examples and describe. The next set of questions are about the main character of the story, Tanaka. Why does Tanaka converse with his mother in his head? Okay, that's a straightforward question. What does he say to his mother? So there's several passages in the work where he starts talking to his mother, who is now dead. Why is he talking to his mother? What does the fact that he's talking about his mother reveal about his psychological or mental state? Number 4, describe Tanaka's method for killing each of the office employees. What is his motivation in killing them? How does he justify this act in his mind? Okay, so this jumps to the final scene where he actually commits the murder, right? This is not his first murder, of course, because he also murdered his parents. Discuss his motivations behind and his justifications for killing them, which are obviously central to the story. Number 5, what do we learn about Tanaka from the following internal dialogue with his mother at the end of the story? So at the very end, right before he kills them, I think, he has this conversation or monologue directed at his dead mother. How does he justify his previous crime in his mind? And the monologue is as follows. Okay, I have it in my translation. I have it italicized because it's an interior monologue. Oh, mama, these people are demon beasts. No normal person would ever do what they do. What would the world come to if they were allowed to roam free? Don't you see, mama? These lunatics are trying to turn the world on its head. It's like what my doctor told me. You know, that shrink who saw after me in prison. You're not a bad man, he said. You're not an animal, you're not evil. Something just came over you at that instant. A kind of veil fell over your eyes. You had no choice. Yes, Mama, that's what he said, and he was right too. I'm sure of it. How else could I have slit your and Daddy's and Daisuke's throats? That wasn't me then, Mama. That wasn't my doing. That was some demon beast I don't even know. I'm sure of it. Which is why I must see to it that demon beasts like that never roam this earth again. You understand, don't you, Mama? Okay, that's the interior monologue at the end of the story. Number 6, discuss the character Tanaka. Discuss his background, his current psychological state, and so forth. Simple question. Number 7, describe Tanaka's first day after being released from prison. Okay, you remember the story starts with him getting out of prison after a long stay there. Describe his first day, what happens, how does that lead to the final scene. All of the events that occur from his first day out of prison to the last day of the story sort of lead inexorably to the final act of the story. So keep that in mind as you read. Number 8, what sort of work is Tanaka willing to do? What are his qualifications? What was the result of his first few interviews? Okay, so he tries to get a few jobs, is not successful. Explain that. Next set of questions are about the site. Quote, site. It's described in my translation. Describe the interior atmosphere of the swanky office that Tanaka enters. What is the result of his first conversation with the man at his office, this office? Number 10, describe the appearance and demeanor of the man at the office. Describe his tongue. 11, describe the tongue-splitting procedure. What is the purpose of this procedure? Okay, so this is obviously one of the artificial acts that first appear in the story, right? You have this tension between nature and artifice in the story. This is the first instance of sort of artifice, or things that are unnatural and which humans usually do not do. Number 12. Describe the appearance of the office secretary Mary Ann. Describe her tongue. Keep in mind that her name is Mary Ann, which is not a common name in Japan, and it adds it sort of emphasizes this artificiality of the site that he's applying to get a job at. Number 13, describe the tongue lengthening procedure. Okay, so another strange, unnatural procedure appears, the tongue lengthening procedure. What is the purpose of this procedure? Right? Straightforward question. Number 14, what service does this office provide? How does the man describe the concept of, quote, somatic ornamentation, aka body modification? To Tanaka, explain. Number 15, do you agree with the concept practice of body modification? Should there be any limits placed on how far we should go with it? Okay, so body modification, of course, is a theme in the work, central to the work. If you define it very broadly, pretty much everything humans do is some sort of body modification from primitive times all the way to the present, right? Wearing clothes is a kind of body modification. So this work sort of problematizes this distinction between artifice and nature, as I mentioned. Should there be any limits? Number 16, describe the tongue removal procedure. What is the purpose of this procedure? Okay, so this one is slightly different than the other ones, right? The purpose is different. Explain the purpose here. Often religious, I think he says. Number 17, describe the physical appearance of Ken, the young man whose penis is split in two. What act does he engage in with Marianne in front of Tanaka? How does Tanaka react to this? Describe the penis splitting procedure. Okay, so things are getting stranger and stranger, and you notice that the work sort of builds to a climax at the end, and it's, I think, unconsciously, the work unconsciously conforms to the Jo, Ha, Kyu, sort of rhythmical pattern that we see in most traditional Japanese art and poetry and drama and so forth. And I think Takahashi composes this work according to the Jo, Ha, Kyu rhythmical structure. So note that as you read it too. How does this number 17, that was 16. What is the purpose of this procedure? Number 17, describe the physical appearance of Ken? Oh, I said that. What act does he engage in with Marianne? How does Tanaka react? Okay, I just said that. Number 18, describe the penis splitting procedure. I said this one too. Number 19, describe the leg removal procedure. Okay, so this is the final procedure that appears, and this is sort of the tipping point for Tanaka, right? After this, he decides what he's going to do, and he can no longer take it anymore. What is the purpose of this procedure? Okay, so those are 19 fairly straightforward questions. Now, the next question, next set of questions, further discussion questions. Number 1, the line between sanity, or normal, and insanity, or abnormal, is blurred in this work. Who do you think is on the side of sanity and normality? Tanaka or the office employees? Okay. And this relates to the next question, of course. Discuss the meaning and significance of the story's title, Demon Beasts, Kichiku. Who are the demon beasts in the story? So I think Takahashi Genichiro intentionally chose this title to be vague. It's not clear whether it's referring to the main story, who is, of course, from one perspective, a demon beast, because he commits murder and so forth. And from another perspective, namely from Tanaka's perspective, the people at the office can be considered demon beasts. Consider this title and what it's sort of suggesting about the nature of demon beasthood. Number 3, discuss the significance of the 2 lines at the end of the story. Suddenly everything came into focus. The veil had been lifted. Okay, the veil is an important motif, or not a motif because it only appears once, but an important image that appears in the end that reveals something about Tanaka's mindset or psychological state and worldview too. What does this veil refer to? In what ways has it been, quote-unquote, lifted? Number 4, in what ways are we all a bit like Tanaka? Okay, so on first reading we might read him, we think to ourselves, what a nut this guy is. He's horrible, he's a terrible human being, he deserves the death penalty or to be locked away forever. But then the more we think about it, the more we realize that our own worldview, or certain aspects of our worldview, are not unlike those of Tanaka. Okay, so discuss the similarities between ourselves and Tanaka. And to our surprise, we find that there are quite a few. Number 5, where is the story's climax? How is this structure of this story different from the Freytag's pyramid that I discussed, I think, in an earlier video, the sort of standard conventional plot structure of a lot of Western stories and legends and so forth, and you find the Freytag pyramid in a few Japanese works of literature, but not many. Okay, instead we see more often the Jo-ha-kyu structure. Okay, so the story does not take the Freytag pyramid structure. Explain the structure. Number 6, comment on the violent and sexually explicit episodes and descriptions in the work. What is their overall effect on the reader? Okay, so Takahashi Genichiro, as I mentioned, he likes to include quite a lot of sexual and explicit and often grotesquely violent scenes in his work. I mentioned that he worked as a director of pornography at one point. What is the overall effect of these explicit descriptions? Explain. Okay, so that's the end of the study guide. Now I will read the story in its entirety in my translation from beginning to end, and you can listen to that now. Demon Beasts by Takahashi Genichiro, translated by Ryan Shaljan Morrison. Tanaka was out. Tanaka was out, but he had no place to go. His only possession was a small duffel bag. He had hoped to sleep below the underpass that night, but the spot was already taken. Men were living in cardboard boxes, water bottles standing alongside. When Tanaka bundled himself in newspapers and tried to sleep among them, one of the men protested, "Hey, you can't sleep here." "What, wrapped in newspapers? What decade are you from, man?" Tanaka continued on to the park. There he found not cardboard boxes, but blue tarpaulin huts. They stretched along the fence from the entrance into the distance. The entrance of each hut was blocked off, yet he could see inside some. Umbrellas propped beside the door, plastic and liquor bottles strewn about, appetizing pots of food bubbling atop portable gas stoves. Some huts even had TVs. What did they do for electricity? Most of the men were reading newspapers. When one of them noticed Tanaka peeping in, he covered the lower half of his face with a newspaper and shouted, "Get out of here! What are you staring at? You some kind of hobo?" Tanaka didn't know what to make of any of this. He cut across the park. An old man was lying on the beach. A cold drizzle began to wet his body. Tanaka stared at him for a while. The man did not move. Tanaka wasn't sure if he was asleep or dead. Tanaka spent the rest of his night in the public bathroom. The next day, Tanaka went out to look for work. He picked up a newspaper, made a few calls, but nothing turned up. Not even a single lead. Even for normal folk, there was no work. And the situation was all the more grim for Tanaka, who was saddled with disadvantages. "I'll do anything for money. I'll lick somebody's dirty asshole if they pay me." Okay. Tanaka opened the door. So this must be what they call a swanky office. Okay, these sentences are interior monologue, by the way, written in italics in my translation. So this must be what they call a swanky office. Classical music flowed softly from a thin wall speaker. The snow-colored sofa, the purple, green, blue, and orange computers atop the white table, the ornamental plant beside the odd-shaped lamp, the gaudy tropical fish bobbing up and down in their aquarium, everything had an artificial feel to it. So artificial, underline that word, key word here in the work. And then interior monologue, "I've got no chance here. It'll be just like all those other times. Turned down flat. Hung up on after the first few words." Tanaka had made it past the phone stage on a few occasions, only to be shooed away the moment he set foot in the office. Once, by some miracle, he made it to the sit-down interview. But the meeting came to an abrupt halt as soon as he started to explain his background. "I don't know what other companies have told you, but you're definitely not working for us." The man standing before Tanaka was young. His hair was blonde, yet he appeared to be Japanese. Tanaka was growing accustomed to such things. Yet he was also agitated. Agitated that there were Japanese with blonde hair and blue eyes. Japanese with nut brown tans. Japanese who weren't mobsters yet were covered in tattoos, and so forth. Okay, these are all instances of artificiality, right? Tattoos, blonde-haired Japanese. We're moving away from nature, and it's starting to bother Tanaka. Is my little commentary insertion there. See you tomorrow. You can start with us then, the young man said, scanning his calendar. To be honest, I just got out of prison. Oh, that's right. You might say I'm out of touch with today's world. I'm not so young anymore either. And also, I could care less about all that. The insides of his mouth were visible as he spoke. Normally this wouldn't be an issue. People speak, mouths open, their oral orifice becomes visible. Been like that for the last 5 million years. No one ever gave it a second thought. Inside the man's mouth was a tongue. The tongue was split down the middle. The two tongues moved slightly out of sync. What's the deal with his tongue? His tongue is split in half. This guy must be the devil himself, Tanaka nearly shrieked. Yet all that emanated from his throat was air. Tanaka tried to flee, but he remained rooted to the chair, unable to stand. Didn't mean to spook you, the young man said, flashing a smile. Everyone is startled at first, but they soon get used to it. Tanaka sat there open-mouthed, gawking at it. He tried to look away, but it was no use. It was as though some irresistible gravitational pull was drawing his gaze toward the man's split tongue. Is this some sort of magic trick? Tanaka managed to spit out. It's a procedure called tongue splitting. I had an oral surgeon in the U.S. perform it on me. A simple operation, really. The incision and suture together take no more than 15 minutes. You can get it done in the States for under $1,000, but here in Japan it's very expensive. Insurance won't cover it either. So a lot of people end up doing it themselves. You just have to pierce several holes in the middle of your tongue and string them together with a fishing line. Then, after a few weeks, the tongue splits clearly down the middle. Tanaka's eyes were fixed on the man's cleft tongue. This guy isn't shitting me. His tongue is actually split in two, and his two tongues move at different speeds. Just then a young woman came into the room. Her skirt was so short it looked like lingerie. Get a load of the body on her, tits and ass ready to pop out of that tiny dress. What's a girl got to eat to get a rack like that? The woman's hair was green, her eyes were gold, and her 2-inch fingernails were painted with a complex design. Let me introduce you to Marianne, our secretary. Marianne, meet Mr. Tanaka. He'll be with us from now on. Hi there, pleased to meet you, she said, turning toward Tanaka. Marianne? Yet Japanese, that much I can deal with. Tanaka peered into her mouth. Her tongue was not split. Its shape was normal. Tanaka felt relieved. Phew, for a minute there I thought. But his relief was premature. Tanaka noticed her tongue was in an odd place. Marianne rolled out her tongue, which unfurled and kept unfurling until it reached the tip of her chin, which it licked as if to commemorate its arrival. Tanaka let out a groan. He was drenched in a cold sweat and his head was swimming. He felt nauseous. He had felt like this once before after spending a week in the hole. Marianne has undergone something called tongue lengthening. Basically, it involves cutting the connective tissue behind the tongue with a surgical knife. Marianne had a surgeon perform it on her, but it's simple enough to do on your own. All you have to do is apply some xylocaine, wait for the tongue to go numb, and then lift the tongue with your hand and snip the frenulum with surgical scissors. There's no bleeding, since the frenulum has very few blood vessels running through it. Some say there's a risk of swallowing your tongue and choking to death during the procedure, but those rumors are groundless, an urban myth, if you will. You see, Mr. Tanaka, what we're trying to launch with our site is something called somatic ornamentation, aka body modification. Tattooing is a simple form of this, but what we're aiming at is something far more radical and complex. You just witnessed 2 real-life examples of tongue splitting and tongue lengthening. Now I will show you another type of body modification involving the tongue. Saying this, the young man booted the computer in front of Tanaka. When it came on, he typed a brief command. This procedure is known as tongue removal. A video began to play on the screen. A man appeared and turned toward Tanaka, smiling. Tanaka looked into the man's mouth. Holy shit, he's got no tongue. Where the hell's his tongue? Sadly, you can't count on your local surgeon to perform this one on you. The more scrupulous surgeons are especially reluctant. nor can you do it yourself. Help is required to pull this one off. The method is pretty clear-cut. First, you pinch the root of your tongue with an iron clamp and leave it until your nerves go dead. Once you're this far, you're pretty much in the clear. The final step is to cut the spot right behind where the upper and lower incisors meet. But you've got to be very careful about bleeding and swelling. If you cut the wrong spot, the leftover tongue can get lodged in the throat. This process is far too dangerous to do solely for cosmetic purposes. We always advise clients considering this operation to consult a psychiatrist first. This step is crucial. After all, a severed tongue doesn't grow back. But why on... Tanaka's voice shook. He was trying to make his mouth as small as possible. If they saw his tongue, he feared, it might split in half. Why would anyone want to do that? That's a good question, the man began genially. You see, we believe that everyone wants to transform him or herself into something better. This is why women apply makeup, why men darken their bodies in tanning salons, and so on. When these standard procedures no longer suffice, the next stage is cosmetic surgery, liposuction, facelifts, breast augmentation, tattooing, and piercing, and so forth. Yet for some people, these are still not enough, which is where we come in, to provide people with access to more radical treatments. Bear in mind that plastic surgery and tattooing were once underground phenomena, but today we think nothing of them. The services that we offer may be heterodox at the moment, but someday they'll be standard forms of body modification. You'll be amazed at the sheer number of people who are looking for a community to indulge their particular tastes. So they can cut off their tongues? You're missing my point. Tongue splitting and tongue lengthening are actually among the more minor forms of body modification. That is, they are intended simply to enhance sexual pleasure. Once you've had sex with someone with a reconstructed tongue, you'll never want to go back. The old way will just seem dull and tiresome. Tongue splitting allows you to stimulate different spots at once, while tongue lengthening lets you reach places that you couldn't get to in the past. Say, Mr. Tanaka, why don't you allow Marianne to give you a blowjob right now on the house? I can assure you, if there's a heaven on earth, this is the closest you'll ever get to it. Now, tongue removal is another issue altogether. Most tongue removers have the operation to express certain political or religious convictions, but such matters are Greek to me, really. That reminds me, Mr. Tanaka, there's something else I must show you. Tanaka was speechless. He didn't want to see something else. He didn't want to see anything. Tanaka had not returned to the world to witness such abominations. He simply wanted to work. He was willing to lick ass if need be. But the last thing he wanted to see was a cleft tongue. Ken, come here for a second, the young man said, pushing a button on the table. The back door opened and in came a large man with a mawkish grin on his face. He gave the impression of a lump of mindless matter. Piercings dangled from all over his face, ears, lips, nose, everywhere. Ken, show Mr. Tanaka what you've got. Still grinning, Ken pulled down his pants. Tanaka screamed, or rather tried to scream, but he emitted no sound. Tanaka sat there wretchedly, his lips trembling. What happened to his thing? His dick is split in two. Oh, mama, what's wrong with these people? What happened to the world while I was in the pen? Ken here has undergone something called genital splitting. Think of it as a kind of enhanced urethrotomy. An incision is made in the penis from the base to the top, making a clean split. They say it's quite painful. The bleeding is heavy. Did you know that the nerves of the penis are concentrated in the upper half, which is probably why it hurts so much? The procedure has also been known to cause erectile dysfunction. So there is a risk, but if it goes well, you will have in your hand 2 fully functioning penises. So what do you say, Tanaka? Are you wrapping your head around all this? Around the sheer awesomeness of it all? The man and Ken exchanged knowing glances and smiled, but Tanaka did not notice. By this point, he had tuned out completely. Oh, mama, these people are lunatics. Absolutely fucking insane. One of our most popular items today is penile subincision. Basically, it's an incision on the underside of the penis. It comes in 2 types. The short subincision, where you cut only the bottom part of the glands, is a perennial favorite. Think of it as a kind of congenital hypospadias. Most of the time, the patient performs it on himself. All you have to do is clamp the area to be incised with a hemostat. but you've got to clamp it slowly. There's no pain at all if you use EMLA or some other local anesthetic. And you don't need to be a doctor to get this type of drug. It's a popular item at sex shops in the USA, but it's harder to get in Japan, which is why we're trying to import it privately. Anyway, once you've removed the hemostat, the incision area is paper thin. It's a simple procedure, and it feels much better than inserting a silicone ball or something into... At any rate, Mr. Tanaka, that's the long and short of it. This may come as a bit of a shock at first, but I wanted you to understand that what we are trying to bring to Japan, namely body modification, or better yet, body reconstruction. The altering of your body according to a preferred image. Our customers contact us through our site. We provide the information, and eventually they provide us with new data and images, which we publish. Our rates are carefully set. It's a booming industry in the US, but here people who are into this stuff have few places to go. Our site is at once a hospital, a safe haven, and a convenience store. There are just a few legal hurdles left to clear. After all, we are walking a fine line between legality and illegality. I've heard rumors that the Yakuza are planning to penetrate the industry and that our site is being tracked. This line of business is no cakewalk, nor is it entirely safe. But it is, after all, a growing industry. You getting all this, Mr. Tanaka? I'm sorry, may I use the restroom? That was all Tanaka could muster. He hobbled to his feet. He felt light in his head. His nausea persisted. He entered the restroom and urinated. He looked at his penis. It was still intact. Computers were installed even in the restroom. One screen was explaining some kind of site. On another screen, a video was playing. Click here for information regarding leg removal. Leg removal is one form of amputation. Please proceed to the next window. You may now retrieve video footage of the leg removal process. A man lay on an operating table. His face was covered with a cloth. One of his legs was missing. A chunk of flesh from his remaining thigh had been lopped off, exposing the white bone. A surgeon cut into the bone with something like a saw, until eventually the entire leg thudded to the floor. Tanaka exited the restroom and returned to the office. Ken was lying naked on the desk. He had a furious erection. Two erect penises that crossed at a 15-degree angle. Marianne was taking turns licking them with her long tongue. It looked like a snake curling through the branches of a tree. A man was filming the scene with a digital camera. He turned to Tanaka, winked, and said, "Here, take over the camera for a bit. I'm going to join in. Just hold it steady like this." Tanaka walked toward the desk. He withdrew a knife from his duffel bag. Then, with a single swift motion, he slid the knife along the man's jaw. Blood gushed like water from a ruptured pipe. The man's throat had been split open down the side. He appeared unable to comprehend what was happening. He looked as if he was about to say, "Come now, enough with the jokes." Then, just like that, he toppled. At such times, one's thought processes cease altogether. Ken and Marianne stared dumbly at Tanaka as he made his way toward them, smiling, knife in hand. Tanaka grabbed hold of Ken's penis. Both penises. Then, with great ease, he lopped them off. What? Ken began to weep. He was foaming at the mouth. Tanaka now turned toward Marianne, who stood there frozen. Jamming his fingers into her mouth, Tanaka gave her tongue a brisk tug and slid the knife sideways across it. "Oh, Mama, these people are demon beasts. No normal person would ever do what they do. What would the world come to if they were allowed to roam free? Don't you see, Mama? These lunatics are trying to turn the world on its head. It's like what my doctor told me. You know, that shrink who saw after me in prison? You're not a bad man," he said. "You're not an animal. You're not evil. Something just came over you at that instant. A kind of veil fell over your eyes. You had no choice." "Yes, Mama, that's what he said, and he was right too. I'm sure of it. How else could I have slit your and Daddy's and Daisuke's throats? That wasn't me then, Mama. That wasn't my doing." That was some demon beast didn't even know. I'm sure of it. Which is why I must see to it that demon beasts like that never roam this earth again. You understand, don't you, Mama? Tanaka took hold of the still wailing Ken's hair, placed the knife behind his jaw, and drew it slowly across. The blade cut through the muscles and tendons until he felt the bone. Putting his weight into it, Tanaka continued to saw back and forth until the knife cut through. Then he let go of the hair. The head dropped to the floor. Just one more to go. Tanaka turned toward Marianne. Her face wore an uncanny expression, unlike that of any human. At least that's what Tanaka thought. This is the face of a demon beast. Suddenly everything came into focus. The veil had been lifted. Tanaka grabbed Marianne's hair. It was like grabbing the hair of a doll. This time there was no resistance. Right, that's the end of the story, and there's another word I thought of while reading the story just now that I should have mentioned in the study guide: transhumanism. Okay, so think of this story, analyze this story, interpret this story with this idea of transhumanism in the back of your head. So look into this word, this idea of transhumanism, and Tanaka is reacting to, I think, to this idea of transhumanism. He's reacting, of course, in a very unhealthy way, but reacting nonetheless. So keep that in mind as you read the story and as you answer the questions on the study guide. That is all for now. Goodbye. Email me if you have any questions. Bye-bye.